They call it, and they will then. Oh, no. Salak sever ya göre. Hadi bakalım. Nasıl? So we'll slowly get started. And find yourself a comfortable thick cushion and then a blanket you might need. Here we go, getting started slowly. Page 2.
Dumbo Jonen Deshin Shabanda Jumba Yanda Barendo Sange Riba Shabso Demba Devara Shiva Jede Jamba Givu Dube Kalu Lana Dumbo Sange Jonden Debe Yawa Shagya Dubala Jazo Jado Jazo Dejin Javan Rajomba Yandam Sange Lipala Devar Shempa Jikin Jewo Duve Kalo Yuba Lana Nebo Lana Milange Dubo Sange Chumden Pegewa Jaya Dubala Jaza Ojolo Jaza Otomo and Dejin Javan Rajomba Yanda Zobe Sange Ripada Shasu Demo Devara Shempa Jigden Jemba Jewo Duve Kalo Yuba Lana Meba Lada Menage Domba Sange Jonden Pejewa Jaja Dubala Jaza Ojolo Jazu Jero Kanze Kanye Zo Jekante Sachen De La Gomba Dumpurne Ane Jiden Dena Choje Zon Dete Geba Gela Jat Nanda Goma Chodu Zuzam Yise Gato Sergel Rava Jiden Zona Lame Jini Gela Jat Denjo Dembo Jeme Dawe Jo Sendo Shaz Duje Jana Sebo Sumaji Nyame Kichin Jola Shaz Pombo Duje Jidemba Tamje Kimbe Tombo Sona Yende Gato Jen Deje Shala Shaz Tabe Tuja Jewa Yu Giwe Nyezo Nejo Chidu Dana Jugula Jugula Rone Jove Layang Laba Dama Shingi Damba Yudene Gidu Layang Viva Chian Meja Shin Jawa Kusum Sopar Yu Rangi Sene Yonsu Tene Sangi Tembayin Kamarare marmedan Guma seba çuğurda Melon loda tindavu Dici çana didada Sona di tamci sibayi Koban tone kümki radıldı Kada nada çive la çure Sibe sole ro Juvara şo
Page 3. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, the supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean, like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds. Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that dharma which pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by waves of aging, sickness, and death. Janju Zemba Zemba Jimbo Papa Chinese Wanshu Sheragi Paro de Chimba Zama Cheba Nila Namba Tajin Bombo Mabo de la Laya Tajinje Tobo Number Tao Dene Sange Ki Tu Sedan Demba Shari Janju Zemba Zemba Jimbo Papa Chinese Wanshu La Tike Meso Riki Bu Kanga La Sheragi Paro de Chimba Zama Cheba Chubar Duba de Jitar Laparja Dege memba nang janju zemba zemba jimbo baba jenre wanchugi sedan demba jarada de bula dege meso shari bu riki bu gala la cheruki paru Samu cheba chupa chupa de titar number tawar jate bumbo abo de la la yang jige toba namba yanda ba Jesu tao su tomba ni su su tomba ni shemai tomba ni le kan su shemai de shen su chorba dang de she dang number sheba nam tomba shari go de da chu tamche tomba ni de tsini meba ma ge ba ma ga ba lima me Shimada Jawa, Shiva Meba, Kama Meba, O Sharibu, Deda Wena, Dombani, La Sume, Sorwa Me, Dushime, Naba Sheba Me, Mime, Nawa Me, Name, Chime, Lume, Yime, Zume, Jame, Chime, Rome, Rejame, Jume, Dumigi, Kame, Bane, Yigi, Kame, Yigi, Nambara Shibe, Kame, Bardu, Yamedo, Mariba Me, Mariba Seba, Me, Bane, me. Kaji sebe badu yamedo tonga yeşime tobanın madoba yamedo şeribo dadavana şarjı zembana toba mebe şir şerabi paradı çimba latin cimne de sema ceva mecim raba medo cince lole şimdi tene nyangene tebe tarı şimdi dözümlü nambar şüphe sanki namci yanşırıcı paradı çimba latin lana meba yanda parı zobe çamçı parı zobe sanki Shiragi Baru de Jimbe Nga, Riba Jimbe Nga, Lana Mebenga, Minyabada Nyabenga, Tunga Namche Raptu, Shivar Chebenga, Midunga Jambar Shebar Jade Shiraki, Baradu Shimbenga, Mepatayata, Parasamgati Buddhisva, Haribu Jonju Simba Simba Jimbi, Deda Shiraki, Baradu Simba Samola Laparchao.
Ene chumden de
Pingi
tengi
zendele shinde
Aju
janju
sembo
semba
sembo
semba
sembo
sembo
baba
baba
jene
jine
se
se wanshu la lekso she jawa jine lekso riki pu dede shino dede shinde jeda chege denwa shindu cheraki baru tu jimbo samola cheba chade de shin sheba nam kya jesu yiramo chomden de je pige je ka tsene tsedan jeba chere la de bodon janju sembo 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 baba jene se wanshu la 함재단 nembe kore de da dam la dam mi dam ma yin de zere jebe ji de yiran from den de ge sumba la mo bere. Page 11. Thus I have heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgriha on Vulture's Peak, together with a great assembly of monks and Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was totally absorbed in the concentration that examines all phenomena, called profound illumination. And at the same time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, was engaged in the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra spoke to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, "How should those of good family learn who wish to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond?" Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, replied to the Venerable Shariputra, saying, "O Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good family wishes to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, should look at it like this, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, karmic formations, and consciousness are all empty. Therefore, Shariputra, all phenomena are empty without characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are neither impure nor free from impurity. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no karmic formations, no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There are no spheres of the eyes up to no spheres of the mind. There are none of these all the way up to the sphere of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, nor is there destruction of ignorance. There are none of these all the way up to there is no old age and death, nor is there destruction of old age and death. Thus there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, and no path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, all Bodhisattvas hold to the wisdom gone beyond. And because there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. Passing utterly beyond falsity, they reach beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times, by relying on the wisdom gone beyond, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, most perfect and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the wisdom gone beyond, the mantra of great insight, the unequaled and unsurpassed mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as the truth. The mantra of the wisdom gone beyond is proclaimed. Oh, Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn the profound concentration, greatness, and level of the Bodhisattva Mahasattva saying, very good of son of the family. It is exactly like that. Profound wisdom gone beyond should be practiced exactly as you have said within the Tathagata's words. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara, that whole gathering in the world with its gods, men, anti-gods, and spirits, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One. So ends the noble discourse on the essence of the wisdom gone beyond.
아니 이거 샤바 무슨 바디 아니 장주 쌤 와서 어디 숨 장주 쌤 맞게 맞게 탑숨 어디 숨 거래서
And now we resume our Thursday evening instruction in the way of the Bodhisattva, the Bodhicharya avatar. It is the Bodhisattva, or the way of the Bodhisattva. This is the title of the text, the way of the Bodhisattva. And so it is a text with 10 chapters, and the second chapter we completed last week. And these 10 chapters are the excellence of bodhicitta, confession, and taking hold of bodhicitta as the first three. The first three chapters are dedicated to developing bodhicitta where it has yet to arise.
제가 요 담보 가서는 장주 쌤이 편신 안 뒤제 제불을 좋아하게 해서 뒤제 일단 장주 쌤이 제발로 롬도 제대로 좋아하게 제대로 장주 쌤이 편신 다들 되게 편한데 때문에 장주 쌤들한 게 줄을 제발 제발로 아니 랑이다 뒤제 요 창고에 봐 있는 아니 소소하게 아니 차 양에 뒤된 거다 양아 뒤된 거로 저거 나보다 저거 그거는 차서는 이거 샤고 어디 많이 땡기 여러 제가 이 장죽좀 빌려 깨봐라 나는 되게 또 사봐도 보고 여러 어디 소사다 되게 내가 눈이 봐도 수박 땡기 여러 손이죠.
The first chapter of the text is dedicated to description of the benefits of bodhicitta, so as to incite an interest in the listener, the disciples, to be tamed, for the purpose of training those disciples, for taming the minds of those disciples. An interest in the supreme mind of enlightenment is generated in this first chapter. So that is the purpose of the first chapter. The second, in order to bring about the arising of the mind of enlightenment, is dedicated to description and development of the supporting conditions and causes for the arising of the mind of enlightenment through the 7-branch offering. Of these 7 branches, the first of offerings themselves, followed by prostration, and third, confession, are all involved in the process of developing autonomy in the mind so that the mind of enlightenment may arise. And the third chapter as well is for the purpose of accumulating the merit for its development.
어떻게 다들 내가 인디도 말다 장주가 쌤생이 줄을 깨버 제발로 아무랑 쌤이 이제 배니보다 대봐 튕제 차단 상황에 있고 이거 인디 아니 튕제 상황에 된다라다 야라 드바티 냠슬랑한테 오늘 야라 드바티 냠슬랑 딜랑벌 때네 아니 제부 장주 쌤이 줄을 깨버도 용거를 장주 쌤 줄을 깨사나 아니 갈래자는 원래 수주 삼아 탐지 가르사마 있는 루트가 용해야 돼. 나 자기 소원이 장주가 쌤 보고 두고 저거 제가 장주 쌤 줄을 깨발라 라버 제바인다 진짜 세 장주 쌤 제발 라바서 집이 그저도 용거를 손을
To develop the mind of enlightenment in the mind itself, conditions supportive of its arising are required. And so the 7-branch offering is practiced as a preliminary training for bringing about and bringing together those conditions that are supportive of the arising of the mind of enlightenment. The result of these causes and conditions that are brought together is the very mind of enlightenment itself. And once it has arisen, then the mind, in its every intention and inclination, is able to fulfill its ends without the same hardship that the accumulation of causes required. And so it is that we train in the mind of enlightenment, and this is the the purpose of the very text, the way of the Bodhisattva, that one trains in the development of the mind of enlightenment.
오예 다 가지고 되다 보면은 나도 가르치면서 나 뉴니바가 타마 다 디바 샤베게 다네 다 디바 모스 샤두 샤바 디바 샤바 쳬발라 님부터 없이 상고고 요바 인자 아니 님부터 없이 거기 디바 샤두 아니 님부터 없이 모두 되게 제요레스다 다 디인도 다 간다 말한저 세미나라 수수비 세미나라 아니 지금 상이 되가 두마투야 메데바도 그 모든 용대도 간가 아니 말한저 세미나라 내게 가자고 요바 인자 비원기 수수가 라마에 같은 동행용 대화만용 같은 제도가 뭐마 사벨에 가자고 요거 되게 다 받쳐발라다 이것도 없이디 그러다가 야고 시험이나 아니 디바되게 봐 내리게 봐다 받쳐 아니 다 사수나 아니 말하면서 다 셈나로 강에다 길을 맞아서 생겨서 라싱이 내가 차가에 요가도 아니 자기 열에서 가지고
Towards the end of the second chapter, we find drawn together the practice of application of the four antidote powers. Through the application of these antidote forces or antidote powers, the mind, with its karmas and kleshas, is pacified. It is each of our intention and purpose to achieve our aims, but when we find ourselves frustrated, and unable to do so, and when we find ourselves continually dissatisfied, it is by the force of latencies, karma klesha, these latencies, that we are powerless and continue to experience misfortune and discontents. So it is for the purpose of removing these karmas and these klesha that we apply the antidote powers. And with their final removal, then, it follows naturally that that same hardship that we knew, we no longer experience, and we are able to achieve our ends very naturally.
오예 다 님부터 없이 야고 지금 시험도 참가디 거랑 야고 지금 시험은 야고 열었어 아니 근데 님부터 없이 나는 왜냐면 제가 뭐좀 마시험도 아니 준주 시당 제가 거랑 나야 되게 배제 신다나네 시당도 때도 고르미야만 따다 요 말했어 같이 이제 또 준주 시동 제가 있나 너무 가려운 거잖아 나뭐 순진이 또 없어 오예 도콘도 도콘도 아니 소모 따보고 아니 그게 너무 순진이 또 없지 다티네 나뭐 순진이 또 도콘도 또 가져다 이바들 땡기 또 좀 왔다 이바데 샤비 유 가와샤고 유 샤유디게 땡지도 땡기 또 되게 버렸어 아니 땡기 또 들라 때는 이거 가듯이 샤당 가듯이 샤고 이메 지르서 뭐 아니 님부군도 지금 또 좀 그랬어 아니네 님부군도 지금 또 땡산에 아니 예바들 라르 예바들 권에 많이 와서 지들 라르들 도배 탑디 아니 시바테 어두지 땡그래 손었어
To count the four antidote powers as four and to know them clearly facilitates our practice of their application. And so they are, and as they are presented in the way of the Bodhisattva, their order is a bit different from the order found in other texts. However, here we follow, taking the way of the Bodhisattva as our basis, this presentation of the four antidote powers, beginning first with the antidote power or the antidote force of remorse. That is, when a person has ingested a poison and they recognize they regret having done so, and then move to the second antidote power, that is, reliance upon the support. And then third, in order to purify karma klesha, one applies the antidotes, and this is the third antidote power, the application of the antidotes. And then follows the fourth, which is future restraint, the commitment never to repeat such actions.
오예 다디 그저 제세 통해서 보기 진주 제가는 세워이나 말하는 두 그런 고배는 두 쇼로 왔다 빼자는 송요레스 그래서 수도 고배 칸은 두 쇼로는 아 시그르선 됐습니다 남자지 되지는 두들의 다리가 탑시 지기로 와서 제주도 멤버땡 저대 아니 맞거든 군주 접선 대야지 오예 다 산지 군주 대야지 다디는 두디 멤버기 두디 교배하게 치도록 맨땅으로 맨을 저대 아니 니 먹고도 지금 또 이제 다디네 두기 뭐 뭐시 멤버 쪽 맨사 자산은 지중 두디 통하다 아니 독립의 독이면 멋이 아니 면 요거 마사와 체계로 어디 나시 백신나시 말아도 유무 다들 유무 독수무디 아니 말아도 거기에는 다 내가 또 독권도 좀 나셔야 된다. 될 교배에 아니 겹도 군주 수면은 겹두고 말해. 맞지? 겹 군주 수면 되는다. 근데 최 군주도 겹물 말아도 유무 독이 내되게 다 10월 잡아라. 최 군주를 냠수 말하면 내 시도고 맞지다. 최 군주 냠수 나야지. 아니 수반이 먹고도 집에도 아니 다 친중 같이 아니 배다 유무 온도 마셔서 쌤 유무 온도 마셔서 지기 사백이 감자와디 아니 냐발을 날도가 또 어디를 잘 숨어야 somos.
Homi Zangbo used this figure to illustrate the application of the four antidote powers. When one has discovered that they've ingested a poison, they'll think immediately, this is toxic and I may well die. And then they seek to expel the poison from their system. And so they find this first is like the remorse that we feel for our karma-kleshas and our negativities. Then when this poisoned person finds a doctor and relies upon the treatment that the doctor suggests, that physician is likened to the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. And then when that doctor makes their prescription or recommendation, then the following of the directives, the instruction of the doctor, the taking of the prescription, this is likened to the application of the antidote powers. That is, the force of the support is the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, but it is the Dharma itself that is the actual treatment and the actual remedy. And that involves the actual practice of the Dharma. So it is the Dharma that is the application of the antidotes, the third antidote power. And then when one has recovered by the force and efficacy of these practices, the commitment to never again ingest anything poisonous, anything toxic is likened to future restraint, the fourth antidote power. And so in this way, then when one recognizes that the mental afflictions, the klesha, are present in the mind as though one had ingested what is toxic, and then one wishes to treat oneself so that they may recover. This is only possible through reliance upon the three rare gems, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, and it is the Dharma itself that is the actual treatment. And so this metaphor from Tome Zangpo.
Number spinning the top the down, come on, never let top the top nearly. It chicken so chow interest. The Yimasan, Chigmatana, and think what tire in your Matigi about the Sangos. Or Sidan she got some or Tinan and the about the Sango or the Litson your reson.
Now, of these four antidote powers, in particular, the force of remorse and the force of restraint are indispensable. These are most important of all. All four are important. However, these two, when they are present, carry the most force.
Oh, that they do that. Nimbuto ship on the Shire, you went connected na. And then Nimbuto ship on the Shire, you went the Latam, Tamazo, Saroko, Tomamevane, Tadabato, Tamazo, seminar, people was savage, leg, Pasayo. Attention, Yelen, you moved your work. You moved the Shabbat, editing in Pajadi, one per self corner, corner to you, leg, you move. And it's a dealer, and it's that's a Shabbat, Ledilla, Penadiora, the Bodilla, the Bashadilla, and this or the Baji, Kirutsevatan, Kirutsevatan, Tadabato, Sasa, the Bachiche. And then she gave us just here us. Kirutseva, she was the Kadaragi, Luda, Luna, Yisun Jukone, the Barang was Majunaya, Shannon, Ched Juba. Luigi on the journey, lives your magical chair, Tilichin, Shannon, the Vasa, Juba children. And then changing the Vasa just here us. Or the work on Domino, Tisuna, degree us.
Then in the actual confession of negativities for which one is responsible, one considers these negativities that have been accumulating since beginningless time, and so they are innumerable. and they have as their cooperative condition the constant presence of the mental afflictions. And so it is then from countless rebirths past, we have accumulated innumerable negativities. And in this life too, the presence of the mental afflictions keeps their continued accumulation and ongoing activity that we engage in any of three ways, especially either directly ourselves, engaging in negativities of body, speech, and mind, or directing others to engage in negativities of body, speech, and mind, or rejoicing in the negativities of others that they perform through body, speech, and mind. And all negativities will fall into these categories, one of them.
Oh, yeah, that she what you just you know, and it before the rangi what you chart was. She gave what you were just here on the round give out to the book of the Mobushet I was, or the what you were just here on and dig about it. Just here on Cheway, the round of shady people, culture, the round of the people, the way you meet you told the
Now, when one relishes the non-virtues performed by others, the force of the non-virtue, one experiences oneself. That is, one is responsible for the very same negativity. Similarly, when another engages in virtue and one rejoices in this virtue, one takes responsibility too in that virtue. And so we say then that one mustn't ever invest themselves in the negativities of another by relishing that negativity. And so we say this of negativities as well as of virtues.
아니 지미지 미다박스 먹어서 미다박 뒤심에나 아는 건 최체 챙겨 말았어. 최체 현실에 가보요. 최체 전부 있나요? 아니 이들은 지마도야. 아니 최 야고 비다고 마요. 누가가 미다박 뒤시 야고 매면 아니 최체 챙겨 말해서.
Now, what idea, what conception is essential to this practice? None other but the conception of the impermanence of phenomena. Without an awareness and conception of the impermanence of phenomena, it never occurs to a person to practice the Dharma. One is simply incapable of first engaging in the Buddha Dharma. And or once one has the performance, the practice of the Buddha Dharma isn't of the same quality. So it is that the conception or idea of the impermanence of phenomena is indispensable.
Oh, yes, that did without 태양 아니면 뒤시 메타바디 말로 치워지 말로 거는 다 한다라는 게 거리는 샤투 보고 열었어. 시차나 먼저가 나와요 말로 쇼르사레스. 제가 마시고는 나는 그거 샤가 나와도 열어. 건강 열었어. 그래서 이거는 샤고 열었어. 제가 뒤인데 아니 치워고 매고 왜 치워고 도양 치워디 많이버 치워대 공부를 예벌 치워 맞지 치워들라 그 남친 예매 어디시기 예매 그라 라와매 봐 어디양 뒤시 대양 고 예벌 거스 대강을 딱 시차에 제라 아니 수술 수 펜토를 수익적 투그래서나 세 딜라 레 삼보사이나 랑 격투기 요다 레 예바이는 격투기 매봐 어디 아까 치외 제라 랑게 레 치외 제조디 제하고 제이나 이걸 하나다 팽기요 격부요 어디지 숨디 야가서 참을 거네 아니 뒤쳐버렸다 야내 쳐버려서
So then the conception of impermanence, and along with this the ever-present awareness of death. This too is an indispensable component of practice. It is required for there to be ever any urgency in one's practice of confession. The recognition that one will certainly die. At that time, once one has died, the power, the freedom to act deliberately to remove one's negative karmas is lost to a person. One has no more power or freedom to do that again. And so it is that one must recall again and again death, and recall again and again one's personal death, that it will come, that one must die, yet that the time of death is uncertain. And so before I die, I must engage in these practices for the purification of negativities. And furthermore, along with this impermanence and the awareness of impending imminent death, a third indispensable practice is to recognize that at the time of death, nothing but virtuous karmas will be of any benefit to the person. Any negativities one is responsible for will hinder and harm, but any benevolent, kind, pure actions will be of benefit. That alone can offer assistance at the time of death. These three are critical.
rangi gyunor saba ki pe ta gyujala pe zambuli ki gyujala yode kanga susu imba ina yang susu jala chik tiya toptan yo mares zambuli mi kanga rangi pe pama den chogo ina yang rangi mi chik tiya rogo yo mares seda kanda marangdo ku chik pake seme ringla pe doja wangi chakwe wangi rangi pe nyenga delis pe nyenga delis chakwe wangi les mangu sa yo re ane kondro ku wangi ane mila ko pe ngala nyoba jinyere ko tujare delis chene ngazo mila control one sub le mangu sa sha yo o de sa sa yu de ga ga a sha ne dress che da de ni sun me ring de la ta da ma sun me ring de la ani cha dang wang ma sho ba chen da le de wa sa o les o de ba yu de ba sa yu na pang de wa sa yu na ani ko yo on de pyo chen ya ne che wo le so
While living, whoever are one's friends and family, whoever they may be, they will later, at the time of one's death, be of no service, be able to provide any assistance. They will provide no assistance. They will be of no service. At the time of death, there is no protection, and one leaves behind all of these individuals whom one has believed are so influential. And so it is also with belongings and wealth. All that we accumulate with an idea to their value, in the end, none of them can be carried along with us, and we go forward alone, with none of the wealth we've accumulated and with none of our friendships, no matter how wonderful they were, no matter how excellent the parents were to us. At the time of death, we depart alone. Now, during our lives, when we allow ourselves to come under the sway of the mental afflictions, come under the sway of aversion and hostility, we then harm others, and all of that harming of others by the force of our aversion and hostility, that all remains with us. Yet the individuals who incited us to anger, they have disappeared. So it is then that we avoid hostility and aversion in recognition of that. And so it is when we are attached to others, we're attached to those very same individuals who later disappear, and whatever we've done through attachment that has been destructive, that remains with us. So it is our practice then to wherever and everywhere abandon negativities, and everywhere develop and further our virtues.
top tambu yamslen number sunjin de top sing yamslen ji tije ta tengi top sing de ten kunjo sum de ma kunjo sum tengi top yingwa kinzen karna ranzola pena nele kyobe ge chido ne moshini amji korwa odi chöde de ranzo nyumo tu sum mojo chi de ani sangye ti mojo chi ge chane sangye na ba da ta sangye oya ta dine nele mo kyobe de sö korda men korwa men chöde de 아니 최군조들이 가서 동네들이 아세야 파비 요런 최군조 차대 그래서 아니 기류군조들이 내가 내요 여보고 내요면은 내가 내 주고 잘 말어 되나시 내는 유도 타베지도 아니 기류군조 전다 딱히 알아서 왜 이모들이 유도 타는 호화를 들으치더라 아니 저 기류군조 뒤에다 뒤순들라 땡이 톱소들이 참여했어.
The preceding description then is a description of the way in which remorse is practiced actually. And then for the second, the force of the support, this is reliance upon the three rarities, the three jewels. They are that which protects from the illness of the mental afflictions. And the way this occurs is the first diagnosis is performed by the physician, just as it is in a hospital. The first diagnosis is by the Buddha, who diagnoses us as suffering as a result of an infection of the mental afflictions. And so the Buddha is likened to a physician. And then the treatment prescribed by the Buddha is the practice of the Dharma. And so it is the Dharma itself is the actual medicine. And then those who support and nurse one back to health as they follow the treatment, the course of treatment recommended by the Buddha, this is the nursing staff, as it were, the Sangha. And so these three that are the support are for the reduction and final elimination of the mental afflictions, the klesha, so that one may be liberated from the suffering of cyclic existence.
오야 다 수보데 너버 수 들어와 니뭐 군도 좀 또생인데 아니 또 동문이 고마 되는 비고 다 비고 집에 아니 동문이 때문에 도들도 마음은 로바다 메라 시아바들 니바 수보데 아니 송아 하게 산지 좀 내대다 아니 하도 송아 대바들 근데 나 지시집에 고수 그 누군지 전에서 최대한 샤워 아니 때문에 꾸샹모도 또 나가면 꾸샹모 오지도 어디서가 또 가르쳐다 이래다 이모 또 시기는 이모 또 숨어 이모 구도 집에 또 생기냐면 지금 그래서
Now the application of the antidotes, the third antidote power, is primarily meditations upon emptiness. That is the study of texts describing the view of emptiness. Also, too, as part of the practices of the application of the antidote powers, is a recitation of the names of the Buddhas and of deities. And so, too, is the erection of stupas, the building of representations of the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha. These are practices that are application of the antidotes.
왜 간제가 시바되는 산지가 숨어나 지라게 패는 당자로 숨어들다 산지기 유모 두숨 쌤 유모 두숨 온도 쇼나 저랑 동행제를 비서 마셔 쳐버려 쌤데 아니 매 유모 두숨 온도 마셔 아니 잠보다 니지도 소바 대다고 온도 따와 있나 아니 라면 대화 좀 그랬어 대제 냠도 나와들라 배 숨어나지 배다 유모 두숨 온도 마셔 아니 쌤데 배 계획 초도 좋아도 되잖아 아니 다 Never shiva yamne chegare sonoji.
No, shiva.
Never learned of it.
With the recognition that the presence of the klesha, the mental afflictions, the three poisons, inevitably causes one to suffer, and with the recognition that one wishes to avoid that suffering, one commits oneself to never falling again under the influence of the mental afflictions, and instead always developing instead the minds of great compassion, love, and the mind of enlightenment. This is all in order to avoid ever again coming under the influence of the mental afflictions and always driving toward virtue.
Oh yes, that 하게 네바 망고 예나야 이부데 망고들의 때문에 내 때문에 말했어. 때는 돈이도 지금 자기 돈번이도 지금 공부 있나? 공부니 공부 둘러 때네. 아니 가르스 이거 배 전부 망고 아니 마쇼미도 내가 잘했어. 어디 나시다 내 거기 취로가 축구들이 샤워 있는 산이 있구다. 제대로 샤워 있나요? 아니 밖에서 이거 배 전부 이제 좀 줘야 돼. 여러 번은 축구가 지금 아니 잘라마 뭐마 넘바서 두고도 매춘주지 그 자신 매대만 오시면 뭐마다 잡고도 어디 나시 제가 춘주지게야 아니 배디가 망고 덮치 못 되면 내가 근데 여러세다 되이 아니 간다 그 방제를 니보를 레때 뭐데 말았어 방 이부지 방제 망고 냠도 좀 뭐데 여러서
Now, as we are responsible for countless negativities, we might think that an equal number of antidotes is required, one for each. However, this is not the case. With and by the force of meditation upon emptiness a huge number, a huge mass of the negativities for which we are responsible is destroyed. When one erects a stupa or a representation of the Buddha, again, a vast number of negativities is destroyed by the force of this practice. Just as a steady drip of water can dampen a huge space, how a single spark can burn down an entire forest, in the same way, the force of the application of the antidotes, any one can eliminate a vast number of negativities. So it isn't the case that for each and every negativity, there must be applied to each one antidote.
어이 단 루지바는 샤베 단 리바샤는 루디 소바레스 단는 참 숨바 장주선 용도 송을 루스는 차대 열었다 장주선 요 루디나라 아니 야마 중에는 다 숨도사서 단 하마시리 용 그래 하마시리나가 가리 용거스나 당보들라 이로와 여월 제수 초고고가제 여월 제수 이랑와서 초고고가제 아니 양갈래면 더 소화다 봐. 아니 뭐예요? 어디시 디고가 단주선도 더 벗어야 돼요. 그래서 그거 좀 하면 어디 수박이나 이제 되게 시비 그래서
Then hot my CD got to this.
제수이랑 뭐 제수이랑 니버디 초고고 초고고 구와서 봐. 아니 양갈래면 더 소화다 봐. 아니 뭐예요? 어디 뭐예요? 뭐와서
With the completion of the second chapter, we have then completed the first 3 of the 7 branches in the 7-branch offering. Now that leaves 4 remaining, and they are the practice of rejoicing, the request to turn the wheel of the Dharma, the request to not pass into nirvana, and the 4th, which is the 10th chapter of this text, the practice of dedication.
그래서 한번 제수이랑 생이 겨와디 배 사대고 납 첨부 아니 팬도 첨부들이 여러서 제수이랑 생이 배 맞아 겨와 지알 깔래내봐 아니 제대고 아니 송매봐 어디에 여서는 제수이랑 겨와 생이 겨와는 겨와사야는 초도 기바지 여러서.
Regarding the practice of rejoicing, rejoicing itself is the easiest of practices, the most powerful, the most beneficial. It's the one that entails the least hardship, the least difficulty for us, that loses the least for us, that is most ready for us.
맞아. 뒤에 겨와도 저거는 집바탕 거리는 또 손땅 거래 아니 랑기까지 손땅으로 류롱주 땅에는 롱주 거래 류 땅에는 빌레자랑 류 땅에는 딱 한번 먹어서 뽑아 거래 아니 디나신 딱 차책이나 깔에 자고래 아니 저거 표기는 딱 한번 좋아만 붙이고 봐 제수 이런데 수수기 셈만 삼로 땅에는 현대 교육과 손땅 말 깔에 자고 내라고 생각하고 가지고 Now,
when we practice generosity, the practice of generosity requires so much of us. It requires some resources at hand. It requires money that we can use. It requires us to exert ourselves physically. In the first place, we need wealth at hand. Now, if we're making a generous or making charity of our own very body, that requires bravery and courage. If we're engaging in prostration, that entails physical exertion. None of this is required by the practice of rejoicing. The practice of rejoicing is a mere mental inclination, a mere thought that brings and confers more by way of benefit than even that experienced by the individual engaging in the actual activity.
진짜 되게 제수이랑 제가 개전부 요래서 다 있네. 근데 중중나는 제수이랑 제들라 아니 제수이랑 제들라 전제로 제수이랑 제가 가숨인기를 가숨제도 어디서 되게 요래서
Now regarding rejoicing, as it is treated in the way of the Boddhisattva in this chapter, it is presented in three sections, it would seem.
얘가 당보디 가르쳐서랑 가르치기로 했으나 먼저 균제기 개화를 제수이라면서 먼저 균제기 개화를 제수이라면서 당보디 됐던 그래서
The first of these sections in the practice of rejoicing is rejoicing in the virtue of causes resulting in fortunate rebirths.
다디 자와 가르치는 semje kunji 자와도 지금에는 무슨 뭐 보고 semje kunji 예송기 동행에 소교와당 동행 젠다 되네라 대외 제수이라고 어디서
On page 47, at the beginning of chapter 3, the verse reads, "With joy I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings from the sorrows of the states of loss, exulting in the happy states enjoyed by those who yet are suffering." This presents rejoicing in the virtue of the causes of rebirth, fortunate rebirths.
다 되게 가르치는 나무 지금 당고 되게 semje kunji 예송기 동행에서 교와당스가 다 지금 당고 되게 semje kunji 수도마다 나도 semje 탐지기 따가서 semje 탐지 수도마다 가다가 대외 감 순간을 이거 semje 탐지 감각이 있어보다 아니 딱 semje 지단 때로 예송기 수도마다 지라스 때로 다 예송도 코치기 나네 다 아니 예송들 녀와이다 들었으면와 대승 베이스 아니 동행에서 교와 당스를 뭐 대승기 아니 다 근데 다디가 좀 간단하게 이따가 가르쳐서는 교와들라 이제 열다 손 교와들라 아무튼 교와들 손들이 된다 손은 쳐들이 교와시라 손은 쳐들이 교와시제 아니 예지 쳐들이 교와시제 아니 팔바세들이 교와스 어디지 열에서 어디지 교와스면 열어서 이나는 방법이 손놈 쳐들이 교와스는 그것이 교와다 손놈이 쳐들 그 맞을 잡고 딱 예송을 탈야기 예송을 탈야기 지도라 아니 교와 지교저와 어디라 손놈 쳐들이 교와서 어디라 그러고
Didn't anybody somebody
예지 자두기 교와서도 코알을 탈야기 교와들라 예지 자두기 교와서
예지라나
코알을 내버리지 내버리지 차가 좀 맞아요 코알을 다음에 지단 코알에 바로 예중기 산데 오늘 코알에 바로 제가 여러 코알을 교시기는 코알을 교는 돈에 내가 탈바세를 삼고서 내가 예지 자두기 삼고 교와서 나디는 숨바디 탈바세를 되는데 내 손들 코알 바로 모르게 돼. 다들 800고 뭐 더해 지도라. 여사 교수로 와. 어디 탈바세를 되는
With joy I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings from the sorrows of the states of loss. Now here in the first line, with joy I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings. This is a general description. All beings include the beings of the three realms, the desire realm, and the rest. So it is a general name for sentient life in cyclic existence. As the line goes on, from the sorrows of the states of loss, the meaning grows particular, becomes particular to describe the suffering in the unfortunate realms, which is the suffering experienced by sentient beings that are in hell realms, preta realms, or the animal realms. These are particular realms in cyclic existence. Now then, exulting in the happy states enjoyed by those who yet are suffering, as one engages in exultation or rejoicing in happy states, one is rejoicing in virtue that may be described as of three kinds. Virtue that is virtue conforming to liberation from the unfortunate realms. Virtue that is conformity to liberation, definite emergence from cyclic existence. That is renunciation. And third, virtue that is conforming to liberation, moksha, consummated in the arhat, the achievement of arhatship. These are the three forms of virtue.
다른 그 당보대 가서 선제군지 선제 지단지 내송기도 내송기 동에 내송을 끼리고 선제들이 아니 동행 예술을 교화 동행 예술을 교화생들이 가서는 빼는 내송기 동네 하장기 동네 첨부 동네 망보 동네 지구 이대로 와서 다디 내송기 동네를 타는 먼저 삼이기 고반 토바 인자 아니 될라 하면 고반 코바들 가네 아니 제수이란 제바
With joy, I celebrate the virtue that relieves all beings from the sorrows of the states of loss. So they're the general description of sentient life, and then particularized in the states of loss, the unfortunate realms, exulting in the happy states enjoyed by those who yet are suffering. This is to rejoice in the fortune of those individuals who have found escape from the tremendous, excruciating, the very great heavy suffering of the lower realms and are in the womb bound for a fortunate rebirth in the future and fortune of those individuals. One rejoices.
아니 뭐 공세를 좀 딱깔리 제주될 때는 스페이스 스마나 예수제의 공신 단계도 공신 기우쇼 정도도 와. 대난신 단단 하나도 미지리 가려져서나 땅에 손도 되면 냥네. 다 냥네 다 단련 분들 함이 고반 톱니. 아니 딱그 공신을 레버다고 배 들으면서 배 수수를 대선 내산을 질로 튀는 공신도 더우지. 대대도 더우지 처지 요래서
Now, for example, when we are working and we're tired out by our work, and the work is hard for us and exhausting, when we finally take a vacation, a 2-week vacation or whatever it might be, the mind experiences great relief from the toil that has been so great and so arduous. And so it's like that when one has experienced intolerable suffering in the lower realms, the unfortunate realms, and one has a brief respite in the fortunate rebirth of a human being or of a deity, then it is like a brief vacation from the pains of one's ordinary work.
대세기 내로 차대요레스 다른 내들이야 탈네 아니 아드미 고발라 아니 때 고발 토바디 아니 예손에야 다 된돌라 공실레버 조절레스 다 공실레도 많은 수수기 한 제바도 다 약고 맞제바 있는 양절 한장 예손 맞게 올라왔어 참 말하게 로고 왔어 되나 시지는 말한 드린 다도 그게 동에 내려야 다른 공실레도 저다 공실레도 좀 많이 더 먹어야 아니 뒤치돌아 담아도 냠내되게 치고 요래스 아니 뒤 냠내 제야나는 다들 저도 주와도 장죽선 냠내 제야들 뒤치돌아 모두는 다 저에게 다 제수이란 소문도 치고 어디서 개좀 내 차대 요래서
So it is then like that when we have a brief vacation from our usual work, we enjoy that time. When we have a brief respite from the unbearable suffering of the lower realms, that is a respite provided by the fortune of a rebirth as a human being or as a deity. And so for that period, like a short vacation, we have opportunity that we don't otherwise have. Now we have to use that opportunity and that respite constructively, or else we return again to the painful experience of the lower realms. And so it is then that today is like that break, that brief respite, and so that we don't ever return again to the work that we dislike. We must practice, and the practices that are best of all, the practice that is best of all, is the development of the mind of enlightenment. And in order to develop that mind in the first place, to rejoice in virtue.
난 내가 당에 송을 동안을 탈네 대화를 내비 치도라 근데 내가 지금 주거리를 하려고 그랬으나 주 여주 내가 주범에 저주요와 여주 삼대시 소맥 영주시 어디들 하려고 있나 아니 유도들 하려고 있나 아니 대부 하면 고만 도그래 단다 주시에 잘 그래서
Then Miguel with Judy Bond, and something she, then something she done.
소매시
Zumeshi.
어디게 될라고 있나 아니 그냥 손에 달게 아니 먼저 하면 고만 도그래 해서 토리아 때 율til 라베 되게 해서
Now, in the brief respite from the lower realms, in the brief moment, in the fortune of a human being or of a deity, what practices ensure that one doesn't fall again to the lower realms? The practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous paths of action and adopting their 10 virtuous counterparts. The practice of the 4 concentrations and the practice of the 4 formless meditations. These are causes for that respite, that is, the fortune of rebirth as a human being or a deity.
that's a promotion to what you got. That's in even how about putting together. How about chatting together in the Lavina? But how about chatting together singing the Gadisian Santa? Saudi, Chanju, Juju, Kesa Pass, tell us just Giramos, Luigi Kove Dungele, never tell Giramos, what succeeded.
Now, next follows the second verse that describes the cause and conformity with liberation, that is, rejoicing in the causes for mere liberation itself. So then I revel in the stores of virtue, cause of gaining the enlightened state, and celebrate the freedom won by living beings from the round of pain.
Yeah, that is the Tarvasal, the condition. The Chanju, Chanju said, also Tibo Sumir, Yandu Tiwa, Ranji Tiwa, Tibo Sumira. It was somebody around Chanju, the Rama. Yandu Chanju, Ranji Chanju, Tijan Chanju Sumir. That didn't other Tijan Chanju, you all my shake dwa. Other Yandu Chanju, Ranji Chanju, Nisha or also. All some Tarva Tobiaki. You in Gyasa for the laboration.
The second verse describes the causes that are conformity to mere liberation itself, conducive to mere liberation itself. Mere liberation is used here as a term because there are 3 various vehicles. There's the vehicle of the Shravakas, the Shravakayana, the Pratyekayana, and the Mahayana. And these are 3 various vehicles. The first 2, while the Mahayana vehicle will be described later in the text, here we have a description of the Shravakayana and the Pratyekayana, in which liberation itself is the mere liberation for these individuals.
Oh, yeah, that is Harvard some Tobiaki. You Karilla was not. You Chanju, Chanju, you Karisa was not. And you did not Tambanisha or Tambanisha. Tambanisha, Tambanisha, the Nalo Kadirna, Lu Tambanisha, 4 Tambanisha, Sem Tambanisha, Church Tambanisha, she or
Now, for the causes of this mere liberation for the Shravakayana, they are the 4 close mental attentions, or the 4 mindfulnesses of body, feeling, mental phenomena, and phenomena.
Oh, that Lu Tambanya shot, Lu Tambanya shot, Tananga to Lu Karchiwana, Ludiwa, 就是люди 미장원 장원 생겨다 나가서 그 어서 미장원 장원 생겨래 아들은 소화디 가르치면 소화 동에는 더 생겨 아들은 샘비 가르치는 미탁만 딱만 생겨 나 최대 가르쳐를 나도 모두 봐라 나도 누가 생겨 한다는 좀 제일 들어가서 다만 그들 가르쳐는 미장원 생겨 люди 다른 люди 미장원 돌자이 봐 아니 만나도 대도 따님이나 저와 되게 동행이 봐 우선 동행이 봐 쳐봤어 해본 야들을 쳐봤으면 아니 쌤디 아주 단단 거래 아주 강한 쌤디 따고 생겨 그냥 아주 시야 내가 산이 시기 말에 나이 시기 말에 나시 다도 로직 시사 말에 삼을 들이 좀 와 어디 단지 쌤 따고 생각해서 들어와 아니 다 시버디 다도 맞을 것 같은 거 걸어와 하다가 어디래서 하다가도 대야되죠 오늘 지금 들으세요 저로 어디 되시겠나
The close attention to the body is the awareness of the misconception involved in our body, which is that we perceive the impure as being pure. The close attention to feeling is the recognition of dissatisfaction and satisfaction experienced by the body. The close attention to the mind is the awareness that the mind imagines permanence or a static state in phenomena where it is actually absent, and where impermanence is the only right description of the phenomena. And then in the close attention to phenomena itself, it is the awareness that phenomena appear to have a self, whereas in actuality they do not. Now then, when we turn our attention to the body, it is to realize and recognize that it is to be abandoned as it is. And two, when we turn our attention to feeling, it is to recognize and experience displeasure, though we take displeasure and imagine it to be pleasure. And then in the mind, where we continually imagine that we won't in fact die, that death is far off, that it certainly won't come tomorrow or the next day or the next week, we invent a permanence where it is absent. And finally, in phenomena, in a close attention to phenomena lack any self. Nevertheless, we ascribe to phenomena self.
아니 코알라 타르바스기 얘기였잖아. 호텔에 제수이랑 같이. 타르바 토베시돌라 가고 아니 제수이랑 쳐봤더라. 아니 디냐면 제레스 다디는 지 숨바다 시와디기 류제 코에 동에레스 냐버타와 이라모 세도다 류제 코에 동에레 타르마주인 수레스다. 저 들어와. 류제 코에 동에레 타르마주인이 아니 수레스 근데다마다 말하자면 동해 깨버지니 동해를 타르마주니 됐다 동해 그래서나 동해들은 동해 숨이었다 교회 동해 당고 동해 교회 동해 잡아두지 동해 숨이로 와 역시도 동해 숨되기 아니 맞을 이제는 코알라 코르바 체는 내가 타르마 마주가 저대로 타르마 진이 규디 가라서나 동해 숨보 되게 날고 동해 숨보 되니까 간에 연구해서 동해 숨보 되게 깨버서 간에 깨버서 아니 동해 숨보 되게 잡아두지 동해 숨는 타마디 동해 창모를 봐서 한번이부터 동해다 교회 동해이부터 동해라봐 잡아두지 동해 창모를 했어 어떻게 숨이 안 날고 해서
I revel in the stores of virtue, cause of gaining the enlightened state, and celebrate the freedom won by living beings from the round of pain. So then it is these four meditations that are meditations on the body, feeling, the mind, and phenomena. these are, as practices, causes for liberation, and one rejoices in these. One celebrates the freedom won by living beings from the round of pain. Pain is experienced, and pain is of three sorts. The pain of suffering itself, the pain of change, and all-pervasive conditioned suffering. These are the three experiences of suffering, the three ways in which one suffers in cyclic existence. And the mental afflictions that cause one to experience these are, when abandoned, the cause for rejoicing. And so of these three forms of suffering, the suffering of suffering itself, the suffering of change, and all pervasive conditioned suffering, of these three, the first two are grosser, the third, pervasive, all conditioned suffering, is the subtler.
오야 다도면 참모다라 바센데 아니 간데스다 참모 간데스라고 간데스에서 저어들어와 제가 동네 당번이거든 아니 동네 딱지우 감각 통투를 해서 감각 통투를 해서 디 통투고 요가 인자 동네 라과를 그냥 알아서 라베 나라 참마샤바이나 미수ኞ이네 곧 대참마이 뭐싱거로 와 곧 그런 나는 수고 요바다 곧 나는 냐야 나보다 냐야 매바 하고 그러와 제가 곧 라고 왔어 라고 왔어 다 동네 수바디 잡아 두지 동네에서인데 참모 뭐 참모 이해 가서 배다 부디 라베다 부조 취주지여이나 부디여나 라베도 내가 그 동네 계획이 말하고 동네 계획이 말해라 그 용도 말해서 나그 용어 제발라 용얘기 제발 참모 보러와 그래서 꼭 계시 민나는 친구이나 아니 남자고 부여가 하고 소리를 와 어디나시 동네 동문이부터 아니 딱 우리 수입 셈지 들어다 믿을 수 있는 거 있나요? 동네 뭐 소통을 해서 동네 숨바디 아니 냠내지니 누구만도 동네 뭐 멋진 말이다 걸 참모스라고 해서
First two forms of suffering, the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, are apparent to all. So the question follows, why is it that these are apparent to all? How is it that they're apparent to all? How does it differ? How do they differ from this subtler, pervasive conditioned suffering? It says that the first two are like a thorn in the hand. It's plain and evident that the thorn's in the hand when it's in the hand and it hurts. And when it's not there, one notices it is not there. So when it's there, one notices. When it's absent, one notices. But it's a more subtle experience to have a fine hair in one's palm. One certainly won't feel any pain, but in all likelihood, one won't even notice a fine hair on the palm. But if that same fine hair were in one's eye, one would notice immediately. So it is for a person who practices, an adept of any sort, the sensation of a fine hair in the palm is plain and experienced by them. But for most individuals, they take a thorn in the hand to feel that pain.
오야 다 이래 다 간다를 다 간다 제수 이란 체리 다 간다 유모 탐지 다 간다 이 동해 젠다 루지 코에 동해 내세야 돼 동해들라 아니 저기 동해 숨기다네 잡아 두지 동해도 샤워를 했어 동해 타면 동해 참을 잡아 두지 동해디 샤워 가서 잡아 두지 동해디 아니 동해 신발 깨봐 지고 하고 동해 신발 동해 교회 동한다 아니 동해이 거 깨봐 지기요 동해 찍죠 야 동해 거기 깨 동해들이 지기 와이자 아니 고 차가 되지 동해서 닦고 동해 참아들어야 제가 네 딜레 타로 chen 타르스나 아니 코알레 타르스 코알레 타르스에게 동해를 타르스해야 돼 타라야 거 타로는 차가 되지 동해를 타르스나 아니 동해를 타르봐서 차가 되지 동해를 타르면은 야 동해 신방이 꼬르게 끼어 버스나 코르와서 동해 숨어도 도스에 찍지 좋아하는 꼬르게 이유인데 코르와서 다 차가 되지 동해의 모션 뒤 바꿔서나 아니 코알레 타르바스 어디에 사실 어디서
The rejoicing is in the virtues that allow for final extrication from the cycle of suffering that is a cycle of suffering caused by the ever-present conditionedness that is suffering, that underlies the two grosser forms of suffering. It is principally all-pervasive conditioned suffering that is, when overcome, the very cause for the cessation of the grosser forms of suffering. Because this underlying all-pervasive conditionedness is the very changingness and flux that causes the constant renewal of experiences of suffering. It is the most subtle, and when one is liberated from this, then one is liberated from cyclic existence. The endless cycle of suffering is underpinned by all-pervasive conditioned suffering. To be liberated from that is liberation from cyclic existence.
오야, 딴 이모도 모델도 저거에다 잡아 두시기 눈에 되나라 딴 이모 아무 땅도 되자도 꼭 말이고 저도 말이 봐요. 한테 기회 되자 로라지 유이도 뭐 많이 봐 이도 원세 지지로 집에 로 되자요. 아니 되자 되게 왕이 제일 갖고 제일 세단 기억으로 거기로 어디서 가서 이모 되지 이모 두 숨지 아니 대숨이 샤베 내려와 내 미기와 어디서 간가 아니 다다다 누구의 참모도 나를 열었어 누구의 참모도 나를 샤워를 해서 어디서 오래서 내일 탈바들라 아니 탈바스 내일 탈바디 토바다 제수이랑 제바들라 탈바 차리니까 제수이랑 왔어 내일 다시 야워서
In the first introduction to the mental afflictions, the way in which an object that is attractive to a person becomes cause for attachment, and the way in which attachment then thrusts one into aversion, and all of these are caused by ignorance in the first place. These three poisons that then cause the negative karmas, that they are embedded and play out from pervasive conditioned suffering is the idea to be exposed to, so that one may be liberated from mere cyclic existence. And so the verse describes.
이 탈바들하고 탈바 숨이 잡아 얘도 이 탈바를 안 됐다고 되긴 탈바스 대단하다 디나지 다다 탈바 신이 바디 안 대보시면 탈바지 차대 그래서 뭐지.
And in the third verse, and in the Buddhahood of the protectors I delight, and in the grounds of realization of the Buddha's heirs. This is the fully qualified liberation, not mere liberation, but the description of fully qualified Mahayana Bodhi, Mahayana realization. There are these three Bodhis, or three awakenings, that of the Shravaka, of the Pracheka Buddha, and then the Mahayana.
뭐지 달라나면 자주로 제수 일하와 세도자마다 산지지 고방을 제수 일하와서 그 탐지 방과 연대 탐지 토베 제부 산지지 고방 생각들 제수 일하지 그래서 뭐지.
And so it is then that this is rejoicing in the causes of the achievement of complete and perfect Buddhahood, that is the state of Buddhahood, complete with all good qualities, the state in which all that is to be abandoned is fully abandoned. Now there's much more to develop along these lines, but we're nearing the end of our time, and So then I ask you, how might it be if we use the rest of our time in our question and answer? Because there's quite a bit more to come regarding the 5 paths and the 10 grounds, and that will have to wait until next week. And moreover, there's some tiredness apparent in the listeners. So how would a bit of question and answer work?
Yeah, then it gets to what the nature, but wasn't a way and then get it on the back.
So if there are any doubts, if you have your misgivings that you'd like to voice, then we can engage in some lively argument.
Yeah. Why this that?
Today. On board today.
Thank you, Dan, for teaching. Well, I think when you were talking about all pervasive conditioned suffering, I couldn't immediately think of an idea I couldn't immediately think of an example. So if you could provide maybe an example of how I can think of that. How is it all pervasive? And a tool or so maybe to remember, maybe an allegory or some kind of way I can understand it.
그래서 켜버지기 동아 여러 근데 동아 성기 나네 디오레 안에 기시기 된데 성도 잠발라네 람상 안에 고아네 렌초초 된데 중거선 안에 제자 안에 천시 지샤네 안에 나 고아 안에 렌 안에 레라고친 렌이 제도 안에 천시 지샤 샤투나 어데 내가 쉬기요
뭐니까 두지게 동해생가 현시도 샤나가 또디가 때려 샤나가 마리버티 샤서 마리버티 원기 아니 니와 두지게 레사그와 레사 아니 레텔 니모 쓰다 아니 되고 동해지기로 와 현시상은 마리버티 샤서 마리버티 샤서는 되게 딱 하다 코가 가르쳐서 잡아 두지게 찌그리 캬바 두지게 동해서 캬바스도 코어네 차방으로 봐 캬바제 아니 차방에 가르치기로 했으나 거기 동해 직 저서나 양조 동해 이바제 수바제 바지 깨주 뭐 내가 챙겨줘 와 동해 바지 바는 축이 야조 축 말아서 직 내가 봐요 한테 그래도 누나 지금 동해 길만 채워 요하게 지중얘기 유모 줘와 뭐 유모다 내 니가 어디 아니 가래서나 잡아도 중에서 지금 이것이 잡았을 때 감수 고아가 그 잡이 요리는 잡았어. 뉴체 봤을 때 거기 밖에 내가 되면서 직파 조선의 양교 고도로 딱 컴퍼니는 컴퍼니가 제가 직전에 사업도 어디 나시 제주이 이런데 뉴체 봤어. 잡아 뉴체 봤어. 이해가 잡았을 때 그거 이제 그거 잡아. 뉴체만 또 그걸 내가 봐서 바로 맞고 지주기도 어디다지 제가 지금 대신 대체 대신이 약속이 말이고 싶어. 난 이모한테도 강하게 봐요. 말이고 잘 돼. 말이고 뒤온 게 아니에요. 딱 이모 강하게 끼기로 와. 뭐라고 강하게 끼기로.
Now, perhaps the best example would be, or instance, the best instance to give is avidya, ignorance itself. By the force of ignorance, the samskaras are produced again anew, and with them, the mental afflictions. And so this uninterrupted production of mental afflictions underlie by avidya is an instance of all pervasive conditioned suffering. The way in which it is pervasive is that it is present in all places in cyclic existence, in all realms, everywhere in cyclic existence. And then what, with its pervasive presence, what follows, but the continued production of dissatisfactory states that are as incessant as the cresting of waves on the ocean. When one crest breaks, then the next follows. And in the same way, the mental afflictions produce continually and uninterruptedly, pervading and present in all places in cyclic existence, incessant in their continued production, just as a factory produces and continues to produce. In the same way, avidya, the ignorance, continues underlying the grosser mental afflictions to produce the mental afflictions, and is in this way all pervasive conditioned suffering, and then atop it come the grosser forms of mental affliction in endless production. Any other?
If we are in the samsara, we always have the three sufferings. But if we liberated or we in nirvana situation, we get no suffering anymore. But if we are in the Buddha's pure land, we still have suffering or not?
Lozo, then don't have the Kadina, so Kiwina, the Kadina, not the Yuri, in a Tarpatone, then the Donald the Pongs are a kitchen. In the top Karisag, then any shinkam the Kibayana, and the shinkam de Valaya, and the Donald, not the Yana.
신감을 깨워 있는다. 신감을 깨게 되나 링이 샤워해서 링이 하고서 코알이야 탈산이 찍다냐 코알 손은 거 신감을 깨냐 마사를 되지 요래서 하서 열 제가 뒤뒤 딱 한다도 탈세디 가르쳐서 탈바서 잡아 두지 동네디 가서나 탈바스 때는 세 샤이마 일단 탈바 두지기 메디 가바 삼기야 신경을 깨게 잡아요 말이야. 근데 예제들랑 예도 신경을 가게 말고 그런 내 지와 신경 생기야 산지 내지 지고로 와 어디 잡아요레스 아니 내 신경을 깨네 야마 콜만 깨요 근데 잡아 두지기 동네디 가면은 아니 고양이 콜 깨게 신경을 깨는 내가 깨는 고만 가대 잡아두지 동네 마방에는 거기야 뭐 거는 깨주고 와. 근데 잡아두지 동네 까서는 아니 다 오늘 연주 동네 깨야 매워 차 그래서
In a pure land, there'll be two sorts of individuals. There may be the individual who is thoroughly liberated, and the one who is born into the pure land by force of merit, who may yet fall again from the pure land into a lower state. So there are these two kinds of individuals who may be found in the pure land. So in short, liberation is moksha is the annulment of all pervasive conditioned suffering. With the annulment of all pervasive conditioned suffering, moksha is achieved there. So there are individuals who have achieved this moksha, the Shravakas and the Prachika Buddhas, but they aren't born again this way into a Buddha land, a pure land. That requires the conception of that Buddha. But in short, with the annulment, with the ending of all pervasive suffering, then an individual hasn't any need to be born again into cyclic existence. There's no taking up again of a place in cyclic existence.
치워도 주의다. 개와 거랑 치우 유로와. 그다음 치우 유튜브사를 유튜브는 저 누구로와. 그다음 이제 맞다. 저거 지금 동네에 가서는 가르가라. 꼴이 깨워 가서. 꼴 맞게나 거기 동네 연구해 보니 농사고 영어로. 어디래서.
And again, then, with the end and annulment of all pervasive conditioned suffering, the very taking up again of existence no longer occurs. That is, production itself of existence does not take place. And therefore, birth, aging, sickness, and death is never experienced. Now we, for the purposes of an urgency in practice, develop the conception of impermanence and exercise fear of imminent death. Yet fear of death and death is not the most fearsome situation. It is in fact production of existence, birth itself, that is most fearsome. For following it inevitably in natural course are all the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death. So the actual fearsome event is existence itself and birth into existence. And so to realize that where there is no birth, there is then naturally none of the sufferings of aging, sickness, and death. This is the actual practice. Are there others?
Thank you, Geshe-la. I was interested to learn more about how there's no need for a one-to-one approach for removing negativities with regard to the application of the antidotes. Geshe-la was talking about how vast storehouses of negativities can be removed with things like meditation on emptiness. And so I'm thinking about the four opponent powers sort of as a sequential thing where we start with remorse. I think I was a little confused about so what is the appropriate, like if you're developing remorse for a specific harm or error, and thinking about the antidotes, if they're not, are there specific ones that we should think of as one-to-one in a sense, even though they may be removing more? Is that question clear?
근데 netice 다 계시 된데서 그러와 때 네버 아니 장매버 요래 얘네 네버 장매버 된 거예요 말아 아니 네버 가르사 아니 근데 접에 네버 근데 접에 또 되게 긴기 아니 뎁직라 아니 네버 빼마와니 정도 그래 그래서 그러와 다 아니 동원이가 뭐야 공개네 근데 되게 긴기 아니 네버 근데 아니 정도 그래 그래서 얘네들이 더 가르치게 됐으나 아니 님부터 없이 대다 아니 렘신도 방적네 아니 당보 아니 나가 순진비 또 되네 띵 또 가서 되네 방적네 아니 땡고비 김센 아유메 직접 다 변화 나서 아니 넘버 순진비 또 될라야 당보 아니 네버틱 뭐제네 될라니 네버텐 카실라 직진한 네바 레레라 님보 레레 아니 자리에 요나 메나 That they need to show the silver shells one.
그런 스파티도 다도 스노래. 대신에 배자를 쉬면 봐. 나 인부 지난 먼저 방자다 인부 생겨로 와. 뒤고 있지만 남긴다다. 방자다 인부 생겨 방자 이거로 인부 방자도 막 방자의 치료니 방식을 하고 친구 동무 배나가서 인부 친구들 끼어라고 친구들끼리 방자 주는 방식을 하고 방자 동무 거기 주는 방식을 인부들 다 배나가서 데려가 이모 방인데 이모 참모 방이지 인부들 가서 또 친구가 하고 그래서 이모 중국들 방이라 방대도 또 치셔 빵 이모 중국들 빵 가셔래 이모 라바도 빵 내요 봐 방자도 이모님들 기름이 방자 치름이 빵 이모 주름 깨서 어디 가고 되지 이것이 직접 일단 되게 이러다 봐 다 가르쳐 거나 또 빼는 돈이 또
얘기할수 있으면 손으로지 때 아니 빵름디.
인부끼리 주름이 끼어 인부 춘주지 인부 춘부끼리 아니 방제 춤 사모리 방 와. 방제방도 치름이 방. 어서 이 도단 되지. 지난 방제방도 다 인부 띄우지 도단 되지. 다티 이랬다면 다 먼저 가르쳐 버렸어. 인부도 없이 다 가서 대신 해야 되는 인부도 없이 나는 몇번 참고해야 돼. 당보도 와. 당보도 가래. 인부군도 집에 또. 당보도.
한번 손집에도.
남아 순집에 또. 두 콘도 주고 남아 순집에 또. 일단 타만 예발날도 또 이거지. 예발도 참고 대마사는 이제 이거 다 답이요 말. 거의 참 대차나 아니 셴바도 쉬어요 뭐. 저는 그 방림진의 방법인데 말해. 근데 그냥 아주 아무 수준을 예반을 고반을 두도 쉬어면은 아니 뭐 상마되게 얘기해요 말아. 두셔로 하고도 아니 뭐 되게 아무나 끼어 뭐라 그러는데 어떤 날씨 찍어라 꼭 인부시도 인지시가 끼어 뭐라 되는 당보다 타만이부터 예반도 참고를 했지. 이 찍어서 이제 다음에 인부 충무치기 방제 망고빵 두고를 해야 돼. 돈이 또 시를 귤을 깨서 깨 돈이 또 시를 딱 표준 삼중 공부 가리키기 이거 이나야 이 또지 아니 내 장갑 배기한 이제 순지 동라들의 그 정투를 해서 제자들이 정투고 이거 인류 방제를 뭐를 인지미지 때문에 말했어. 야 방제를 인부 때문에 드시게 요랬어. 그래서 방제를 인부를 이렇게 드시게 요랬어. 이나야 방제 망고빵을 인부를 저거를 대체고 말했어. 돈이 또 대중 시럽다고 지기 내가 뭐내 친구 밤에가 다 들어와. 근데 빼셔 어디서 좀 와.
Then I see your question as being like this, and I gave an example, didn't I? But as I address it, I begin by pointing out that there are abandonments to be abandoned, and then the opponent forces or the antidotes that are applied. and as for each, that which is to be abandoned, that is the subtlest mental affliction. It is the subtlest abandonment to be abandoned as a subtle mental affliction. And it requires the most forceful opponent power. Now, that is to say that one abandons regarding that which is to be abandoned, one abandons from the lighter, more manageable abandonments to be abandoned, and gradually abandons the heavier, graver abandonments to be abandoned. Whereas the application of the antidotes is
일부 주름이 빵대 체름이 빵.
So the abandonment of that which is to be abandoned begins with that which is most needing to be abandoned, the greatest things to be abandoned, the grossest, and then gradually one works one's way down to the subtlest of the abandonments to be abandoned, the subtlest mental afflictions that require the greatest application of an antidote power and opponent force, which means that one begins with the weightiest of the abandonments to be abandoned that may be attended to by the application of the antidotes that are least forceful. But when it comes to the most subtle abandonments to be abandoned, this requires the greatest force in the opponent powers. So this is the way in which the application of antidote powers is applied to the abandonments to be abandoned. Now, regarding these antidote powers, I have said that the force of remorse and the force of future restraint are essential, are the most critical. And it isn't because all four of the antidote powers aren't required. It is that with these two present, the remaining two follow naturally. Furthermore, especially with the first, remorse, the following three may actually follow. Without remorse, the other three are certain not to follow. Without the recognition that one has swallowed something toxic, there's no effort to expel it. And so the order may be understood in this way. And regarding the force of an antidote or opponent power, opponent force, for instance, achieved through meditation on emptiness, in which there is the wisdom that arises from study or contemplation or meditation, the force of that wisdom is sufficient to eliminate a store of negativities. And it hasn't got to be that the antidote power is applied one by one, one-to-one. However, there are explanations, there are descriptions of the application of antidote powers one by one to abandonments to be abandoned one by one. However, it is by the force of the wisdom of contemplation and of meditation on emptiness that vast stores of negativities are in fact eliminated.
두로를 빼셔야 돼요. 아주 두로를 주지도 마. 두로 그걸 정말 나거든도 주기서만 항상 다르고 정말 참아도 주야를 저 마음을 치고도 어디는 신 방제방도 뺏기도 찍고 여기서.
Just again, just as when you're washing clothes, some of the stains that haven't stained so deep into the fabric may be washed in one washing, but the others, they're really subtle, the really deep stain in the fabric requires detergent and special application to remove it. And so it is with the mental afflictions.
Oh, yeah, finish about that.
Are there any other?
So in the topic of contemplating death, how does one, or I don't know if I can ask this specifically, but how has one, or how have you seen one contemplate death at the same time with that person already not having a resistance to idealize that, but like the opposite of that. So maybe not so much of having a fear of death, like person who has contemplated death in a way of like they want to bring it on upon themselves. And how have you seen somebody use the contemplation of death at the same time and then wanting to die? So and is that just that suicidal tendency just another desire that you can compare any other desire to? Would it be the same process?
오야, 너네 그래서 치워고 여러.
Mm.
야, 아니 미망 치워디 치워라니 직다 랑 여러. 이나미 가시기 아니 치워라. 그래서 시에기 되버 아니 요현들 양 여러. 다니 소소 랑시 갭 되현든서 아니 치워라. 아니 공수디 직거르베. 야면 아니 치워라 아니 착박해 여러베. 아니 야면 치워라. 아니 더자 기왕이 치워라 아니 신의 여러베 신의 여러베 제자인데 안들다.
Oh, yeah. 만내 치부지 그거 땅 어. 다들 좀 치워도 또 검제 앞에 막고 열어. 그래서 치워야 내가 보다 가서 지당 어서 치워야 내가 되나 검제해야 되나 이 시두기 치워 보면 찍 남들이 치워 본다. 이 뒤에 어서 저 나가면 맨날 대시로 와. 대시. 뒤에서 다들 다들 치워 차과칭이요. 치워를 차과칭에 세대 때문에 세부지는 같은 소스. 이는 치워를 지나면 이제 치워를 그 수수 치워를 냠되는데 냠에 세 토블레나 아니 치워를 그 지나면 봐. 냠전에 가오치야 돼 요래서. 이는 차과랑 쓰기 말했어. 다 이들서 다 수바도 콘르 오기 치를 뭐 가서 콘르 랑시게 있어. 랑시게이도 망치에 가려 콘르 오기 치고. 어서 콘르 오기 치고. 제가 콘르 오기 치도다 봐. 콜라 가래. 콘르 오기 쇼도도 콜라 이 말이다. 같이 시에를 가는 말이야. 다 거기 치약이 내주야고 마시 봐. 아니 가다 콘로 슈그 온 가다 수술을 다 데모토에로 차든다. 어서 어쨌든 되게 이게 좀 가다 콘로 오는 치되긴데도 아니 치워를 차과서 나도 요바리네 치워를 막아도 요르데 이내가 콘로 왕 쇼르니 아니 콜다 라운드로 차대요. 그래서 알비리소.
Now this is a question of great importance, and it's a question having everything to do with practices with which the adepts are very concerned. And so in the first case, in meditations on death, or meditation of death, these are of two kinds. Meditation on death will be meditation on death in the moment of death, and meditation on death during the path. Now, in the Mantrayana, the distinction is made between these two: meditation on death at the very moment of death, and meditation on death at the time of the path. Now, for an adept, a person of great aptitude in their practice, I cannot say one way or the other about a desire for death itself, whether that would be present in such a person. But I can say certainly that an absence of any fear whatsoever of the prospect of death, a willingness to entertain it would be present in such an individual. Now, realize regarding suicidal ideation, this is not, to my mind, an attachment or even an investment in death, actually. It is a misconstrual or a misunderstanding of the event of death and an attitude that is thoroughly informed by aversion and anger. And aversion and anger overwhelms a person to the point where their circumstances become intolerable to them. And then they imagine death in one way or another, but it is not an actual desire for death. It is to be overwhelmed with dislike and intolerance for circumstances one is thrust into by the force of the mental affliction of aversion and anger.
아니 신소제 랑소제 강가 공도 원진이 위아래스 어디시세 근데 다다 저랑 저리네 저 계신 버렸어야지 당연히 그냥네 제 내가 찍게 이거랬으라 그러더라 그래서 나도 냠네 지도 치워 죽을 남제스 치워디 내어도 추 사이 죽으냐네 제 내가 찍제 근데 친이 바로도 끼기 로글 남제스 아니 진이 바로는 깨wallen도 두고는 제스다 나 그냥 내가 손 대려요 해서
We all recognize the force of anger. It's forceful enough to cause us to take the lives of others and take our own lives. That's how powerful anger is as a force. Now, when I said that your question touched on such an important part of practice, it's the very crux of practice, in that death is the transformation, the event of the transformation of the path into the Dharma Kaya. And the birth into the intermediate state is the event of a transformation into the Sambhoga Kaya. And birth state itself is the event of transformation into the supreme Nirmanakaya. And these are, in the secret Mantrayana, critical practices.
맞아 제만 냐메체 무슨 주야 냐메죠와 무슨 주야 냐메의 장시디 계시 무슨 장 되는 장만을 때네 아니 무슨 주야 그 냐메 냐메 새 도를 해서 뭐지.
And so it is in the practice of the secret Mantrayana that one transforms these three events into the three Patavadis, the event of birth, the event of death, and the event of the intermediate state. Any others? Oh, no more.
Yeah, I think I'm getting on the Nimutoshi, Yamen Sheba, any Yamen, Nimutoshi, Yamen, Nimar Chitu, I think I'm doing with Sa, the leg, the candidacy or is not. I'm doing Sandy. Somebody gave up option in the Jalash as a machine, a little chair, or a dinner, down to the leg, in the sun, Shasha. A lessing in the any that much on Mashana, lady, the Wuchaman thing. Giggles, the way giggles, the way my year, to me past 7 years, that have she. Lady never saw, lady never sues, so was then you would have she saw us. Then you would have she case and was, then you would have the Kaduchi was not that you do. And that you would have the chair, Yamacha, to do the lady or the then you would have she. And then it's Chivores, Cheva Yena, and Harry was the lady Tata, lady Tana, and another Jama Dume, Yangua Yomai, led younger Dumena, Jebu Marata, Dinasti, Nimutoshi Cheva Yena, lady Tagra, lady Tawina, Mother Dume, Yangua Yomai, and then the watch is to call a carpet, the watch and Yaman Dume never chat. Over Tamatanya, your response. Each of them, none of them is.
Now, with consideration of the 4 antidote powers and how they are to be practiced, and the way in which they may be practiced each day, should we actually practice them each day? What would result from this effort? It would be to effectively challenge the vast store of our negativities that, if it were held, if the greatest wealth with its greatest warehouse that can hold all that there is were to attempt to store up all the negativities for which we are responsible, they would not fit. Yet we have to remove every last one of these negativities, for these are the cause of the karmas and the continuation of the mental afflictions. Now, in order to thoroughly eliminate all of these, one must apply the antidote powers. It is essential if one is ever to confront this vast store of negativities. And if this is so, then it follows that from the first realization of a moment of freedom to do so, to apply antidote powers, one must apply the antidote powers. And that moment of freedom we can realize is the present moment. And so with great earnestness from this moment forward, we must engage in the application of the antidote powers to purify and eliminate the karma klesha. For as long as they remain, then the karma klesha cause suffering inevitably. So then we apply the antidote powers. And with the antidote powers applied, then eventually suffering of cyclic existence, the bondage of cyclic existence, we may be liberated from, so that we experience contentment. And this is achieved through the application of the opponent forces. And so with this in mind, then, with this end in mind, we recite our closing verse.
Imagine 그저 가만 찍지 나와요. 이부터 차단 양이 제도였는데 여러분 이 말을 제가 있나? 아니 네, 랍체모 아니 말한 거지. 거기 딱제 딜레야. 그래서 그 동네시에는 팽개를 또 딱제 치마 팽개를 두네. 마요 된다 또 그래서 세틀을 동네 마요 세리 주체 또 말아. 제가 주체생인데 제 치마는 벤제를 땅으로 동해 마요야 대화 용어를 치더라 아니 세디기 랭게도 차는 지기 열었어 그래서 님부터 시대에 거기 동해 뭐만 양사에 내 뭐만 싸서게도 봐야지들 님부터 없이 친중 야구 영향을 전달하는 제수이라는 냠내 제외이나 아니 니만 지금 냠내 가진 튜로 그래서 어양 디지털은 땅으로 되게 그래서 내 지금도 양내 지금도 또 보이면 아니 시간을 패버리면 되게 많은 잡쇼 사는 것들 남이만 또 위에서
To apply the antidote powers doesn't require any resources in particular, or even any great hardship. We could apply the 4 antidote powers in 60 seconds, and we could do that each day. And were we to do that, then we would see the benefits in this life. But most importantly, we would realize the benefits in our subsequent lives, because the practice of the Boddhisattva is not primarily for beneficial results in this life, but in lives especially to come. And so we practice the application of the antidote powers in order to confront and eliminate that vast store of negativities. And then when this occurs through the efficacy, the simple efficacy of rejoicing in virtue, we see the increase in the constructiveness of these very application of antidote powers. Now, so that each of us may succeed in these practices for our own benefit, and furthermore, that we may succeed for the benefit of others, we dedicate this very practice and idea in our final Lamrim dedication verse. From my two collections, vast as faith that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds, wisdom, eyes, blinded with pain. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of the paths of the complete teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I hold this teaching for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teaching or once spread have declined, may I offer this deep treasure of happiness to aid all sentient beings. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by following the complete graduated path to enlightenment and the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings that eliminate adversity and make things conducive for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected for the benefit of the teachings and of sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Boddhisattva Boddhisattva. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful and contending God's home. Please remain until cyclic existence is ended. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too, think as they are. Also, I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best, by the victorious thus gone ones of the three times, so that it might perform the noble Boddhisattva deeds. May the supreme jewel of Boddhisattva that has not arisen, rise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Thank you. Good night.
아이. 이게 뭐죠? 이제 안 난고.